In the heart of New York, inside a television studio, what began as an ordinary talk show broadcast was about to become a confrontation that would go down in American television history. That day, the audience of the Wendy Williams show had settled into their seats, ready for the host's sharp jokes and gossip-filled commentary. As always, the topics included sensational names, red carpet disasters, and social media scandals. Wendy acted like the queen of her stage, skillfully guiding the audience's applause. But at one point, everything changed. When Wendy turned the topic to Melania Trump, the atmosphere in the studio instantly cooled. Melania Trump, she said with her signature mocking smile, became a fashion icon not just for her heels, but for her silence. The audience smiled timidly at first. Then Wendy took the joke further. Be best. More like be gone if you ask me. Not the first lady, but definitely the quietest. Laughter erupted, but one person sitting in the studio didn't laugh at all. Barron Trump. He had chosen to remain silent for years about the comments made about his mother. But now, he was 18 years old. And that night, his patience had run out. His face was frozen. His eyes locked not on the cameras, but on Wendy. His fingers pressed into his knees, trying to control his breath. But his heart could no longer contain the silence. Suddenly, he stood up. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras shifted angles to catch Barron's unexpected movement. Wendy looked up in surprise. Their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped in the studio. No one knew what was about to happen. But everyone felt one thing. Barron Trump was no longer just the quiet son of a former president. That night, he had come to write his own story. And that story was just beginning. The whispers that had suddenly risen in the studio gave way to a silent anticipation as Barron Trump walked forward with determined steps. As he slowly moved through the audience, all the cameras were now focused on a single person. Barron had never been under such a direct spotlight, but he wasn't afraid. On the contrary, for the first time, he was truly being seen. Wendy Williams initially thought it was a surprise show moment. Keeping her sarcastic smile, she said, "Sir, we're used to unexpected stage appearances here, but you usually stick to tweeting." The audience tried to laugh, but the laughter was weak. Because there was no anger or showiness on Barron's face, only a clear purpose. When he reached the stage, he took the microphone and stood silently for a moment. Then, taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "I didn't plan to speak here. But some things, if left unspoken, turn into an even greater mistake." The audience was stunned. Barron Trump was speaking, confident, calm, and measured in his words. Referring to the jokes made about his mother, he continued, "It's easy to judge a woman based solely on her silence or her clothing. What's difficult is trying to understand what lies behind that silence. Melania Trump is not just a name or a model. She is a woman who has stood tall through adversity. And that woman is my mother." An emotional wave spread through the room. Some audience members looked away. Others nodded in agreement. Wendy's eyes widened. For the first time, someone on her stage had changed the rules of the game. Barron continued, "We are all here for the show. But the show gives no one the right to tear down another's dignity. Humor is powerful, but it requires responsibility. My mother has stayed silent in the face of these remarks for years. But I will not stay silent." Wendy tried to respond, but Barron stepped forward. "This is not a fight. This is a reminder. Respect is not earned through fame. It is earned through character." There was a brief silence in the studio. Then slowly, applause began to rise. First a few audience members, then the entire studio stood up. Wendy, caught off guard by the situation, tried to recover, but nothing she could say would be enough. In that moment, Barron Trump was no longer just a young man carrying the Trump name. He had become someone who stood his ground, who moved with words, and who left an impression. The night in the studio took a different turn. Laughter gave way to thought, mockery to awareness. Barron Trump had broken his silence, and that silence was never coming back. When Barron Trump slowly placed the microphone back on the stand, the applause echoing through the studio had not yet died down. The audience was on their feet, visibly moved by the young man's words. This was no longer just a television show. It had transformed into a national reckoning. What Barron had said didn't just defend his mother. It held up a mirror to everyone watching. Wendy Williams stood on stage, but she could clearly feel that the control was no longer hers. The dominance she had maintained for years as a sharp-tongued, quick-witted television star had been broken that night. Barron Trump's speech had silenced her, not with insult, but with honor. Wendy took the microphone in her hand. Normally, in a moment like this, she would recover with a clever joke and get the audience laughing again. But this time was different. She muttered a few words, then stopped. She simply bowed her head and said, "I think we all need to reflect a bit tonight," before closing the show. As the program ended, social media exploded. Hashtags like #BarronTrump, #StandUpForRespect, and #WendyWilliamsShow flooded the trending lists. People were divided. Some defended Wendy's words as typical showbiz humor, but the vast majority applauded Barron's stance. One user wrote, "Barron Trump didn't just speak as a son today. He stepped onto that stage as an individual and taught us all something." Another tweet read, "This story was stronger than anything Hollywood could script. Respect is more valuable than screen time." The next morning, television programs, newspapers, and digital platforms were all talking about Barron Trump. The young man who had long lived in the shadow of his family had suddenly captured the attention of millions. But that attention was not sensational. It was rooted in respect. When Melania Trump watched her son stand, she was deeply moved. When a reporter extended a microphone to her for comment, she simply smiled and said, "My son gave me the greatest award of all. He protected my honor." As for Barron, he didn't say much about what happened. He stayed out of the media, declined interview requests. Because stepping onto that stage was never about being recognized or praised. For him, it was about giving voice to a truth. This event wasn't just a moment of a young man from a famous family speaking out. It was a moment when society questioned its gaze toward celebrities, when it learned where the line between power and mockery must not be crossed. It reminded us all that humor is not measured by freedom alone, and honor is not measured by silence. Perhaps the most striking thing was that what Barron Trump did was not merely a defense, it was a stance. The person who took the stage that night wasn't just a Trump. He was a young man, speaking as a human being. And that speech became a lasting source of inspiration for many. That night, Barron Trump didn't just stand up for his mother. He stood tall for something much greater: dignity, character, and the silent strength so often overlooked. For years, people had seen him merely as the quiet, reserved son of a former president. But on that stage, in front of a live audience and millions watching at home, he became something else entirely. He wasn't seeking applause, attention, or controversy. What he delivered wasn't a defense, it was a statement. His words, calm yet powerful, reminded everyone that standing up doesn't always require shouting. Sometimes, it takes unwavering conviction and quiet courage. He showed that protecting someone's honor isn't about theatrics, but about truth. His voice broke through the noise, not to attack, but to awaken. This story is more than just a viral moment or a talk show confrontation. It's a powerful example of how one individual, even in the face of fame, comedy, and media pressure, can hold their ground with grace. Barron reminded us that identity is not defined by a last name or legacy, but by one's actions and values. He challenged a culture that too often disguises cruelty as entertainment, and asked a question we all need to face. Who are we laughing at, and why? What unfolded wasn't just a rebuttal to a joke, it was a mirror held up to society. In a world where applause is easily earned and honor is easily dismissed, Barron chose the harder path. And in doing so, he didn't just speak, he transformed. That moment became a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Because respect, as he proved, isn't granted by fame or age, it's earned through integrity. And on that night, Barron Trump didn't just find his voice. He gave others the courage to find theirs. If this story moved you, stirred something within you, or reminded you how a quiet voice can rise and stand tall, please don't forget to like this video. Here, we're not just sharing events, we're sharing emotions, integrity, and the silent acts of courage that often go unnoticed. Barron Trump's determination that night wasn't just about defending his mother. It was about giving a voice to something many feel but rarely express. I invite you to share your thoughts, feelings, or reflections on this story in the comments below. Every comment helps build this community, one brick at a time. And if you appreciate content that goes beyond headlines, stories that are written not just on paper but in people's hearts, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Because this journey means so much more with you in it. With every new video, I hope to grow with you, to spark honest conversations, and to give a platform to the voices that need to be heard. Your support is the most valuable part of this channel. Thank you for being here. I'm truly grateful.